Now that we've explored the process of painting with layers, it's time to try something a little bit different. We're going to experiment with painting a little bit from imagination and use our layers to adjust this study into our own original piece. I started by gathering some reference and inspirational images to help me come up with some ideas, and after that, it's time to do some thumbnail sketches. You never want to go into a painting without a plan, so I've copied out my original image, scaled them down, and I'm just going to quickly paint over top of them to see which idea I want to move forward with. These quick planning sketches don't have to be clean or refined, they're just an opportunity for you to experiment and try out some ideas to see what sticks. The main thing I want to change in these sketches is the headdress, as that's kind of the focal point of the entire piece. But I'm looking for other opportunities of things to change as well, such as how the cape drapes across her shoulders, the length of the sleeves, the value of her hair, and anything else that seems like it could be a cool costuming change. I'm really just looking for big shapes here and seeing if I can change up the idea from the original study into something that I'm interested in. I've decided to move forward with the first sketch with the kind of raven skull headdress, so I've copied that onto my actual painting file, saved out a copy, and I'm going to start adjusting this painting. Right off the bat, I begin by deleting any of the old layers that I don't need anymore, such as the headdress, the skulls, and the antlers. From there, I can simply create a new layer and start defining the new elements in the piece. This process is exponentially easier due to how organized my previous layer structure was. I can paint the headdress without having to worry about it overlapping the earpiece. I can add a layer to go behind the face very easily, and as we move forward you'll see some other situations where my previous layer structure saves me tons of time. I'm starting off with just a very loose block-in. If this were a more complicated headdress, I might consider drawing it with line first, but I feel like the shape is simple enough that I can get away with just painting it directly. I also want to change her hair from light to dark, and to do this I'm creating multiply layers and clipping them to my previous hair layers. This makes it extremely easy to adjust the value of the hair without messing up anything else. Once I'm happy with the new value, I can simply merge those layers down onto the hair and paint a little extra detail on top by hand. I'm going to do something similar with her shoulder, which was previously covered in fur, but I want to change it to feathers. So I'm going to lock the transparency of that layer, darken the value overall, and then simply start painting the feathers on top. I'm looking for a nice silhouette shape, and I can always add interior details later. If the shape isn't good, then no amount of detail will save it, so I'm starting simple and gradually working my way to more complexity. Again, my previous layers are coming in handy here, as I can paint the feathers very easily without having to worry about the silhouette of the skull ornament on top of the shoulder. Same thing for the other side of the body, simply darkening down the fur by locking the transparency, then unlocking the transparency and painting the new feathers on top. I'm just using a mixture of the brush tool and the eraser tool to get exactly the shape I want, as well as cutting out some smaller details and fraying of the feathers. I'm also adjusting the skull on the shoulder to be slightly more bird-like, and since that element is on its own layer, this is extremely easy to do without worrying about the feathers underneath. Here I'm going back into the hair and just trying to refine it a little bit more with my brush tool. Here I want to add another layer of feathers behind the primary layer of the headdress. I'm doing this on a new layer as I want to be able to adjust both the shapes and the values independently of the feathers in the front. Here I'm making a quick little crest to go on her far shoulder, simply drawing it as a flat circle first, painting in a quick pattern, adding a little bit of light and form to it by locking the transparency, and then I can simply free transform it into place and not have to worry about drawing that pattern in perspective. Once the crest is in place, I can do a little extra painting to make it feel more like it's attached in the scene, and adjust from there. I've also decided to remove the fabric draping from her hand and instead have an interesting special effect where she's sort of conjuring the blood out of the bowl that she's holding. That fabric was on its own layer, so it's very easy to delete, and now I can make a new layer for the blood effects and simply paint those in by hand. I'm using the dual-edged brush here as I find it works really well for liquids, as you kind of want a hard edge that becomes more translucent towards the center. Layers are extremely useful for painting translucent materials like this blood magic here, as you can paint the shape and forms with your brush tool, and then just erase or mask out a little bit with a soft brush to get the effect of translucency. Painting this effect on just one layer would be much more difficult, and if I ever decided I wanted to change the arm or the hand behind the blood effect, it would take me a lot more time to adjust. So using these layers is not only helpful for the painting process, but it's also a contingency plan if I ever have to make difficult changes later on. Following my thumbnail sketch as a guide, I want to create some draping chains between the skull and her crest. I can begin by simply turning off my previous necklace layers, and then grabbing a simple chain brush and adding some nice draping curves. I then select the skull and the crest, and use that selection to create a layer mask so it appears like the chains are going behind those elements. Lock the transparency, and paint a little bit of light and form with the soft brush. With the loss of the previous necklace, the chest area is now feeling a little bit plain, so I want to go in here and add a subtle pattern to it, like it's carved leather or something like that. This isn't the focal point of the piece, so it doesn't need to be complicated, but a little extra detail here goes a long way. I like these draping chains a lot, but felt like they were a little isolated just on the chest, so I created a couple more layers, one in front of the face and one behind the face, and repeated the same process as the necklace. Again, you can see how helpful using layers is to speeding up this process. By keeping those chains on their own layers, I'm easily able to lock the transparency and paint the lighting, and I don't have to worry at all about the way they overlap with the face, because all of those elements are separated out cleanly. I'm going to adjust the sleeve and remove the fur texture. I'll simply erase out the fuzzy soft edge I created previously to create a more cloth-like silhouette. I've kind of removed the fur from the rest of the design, so it doesn't make sense for it to only appear on the sleeve. And then paint the new folds over top of the fur. Now that everything from my thumbnail sketch is in place, I can start doing the final refining and detailing of these changes to the painting. Since the headdress is the most important part of the image, I want to invest the most time there, adding some nice forms, details, metallic trims, and refining it until it feels on par with the level of finish of the rest of the painting. Another thing I want to do in this painting is add an interesting background design element. My go-to for this kind of image is just a cool circle behind the character's head. It's a little bit cheesy, but it looks cool and it works, so I'm alright with it in this case. Again, my layers are going to be extremely helpful here, as I can create a new layer inside a group behind my entire character, use the marquee tool to create a circle that sits nicely behind the rest of the character, lock the transparency of that circle, and paint in any details I want by hand. I'm giving it a little bit of texture so it doesn't stand out too much, and then creating a glow layer with linear dodge to help the values of the character pop. Next, I want to add a little bit more design to this background, so I've turned on symmetry mode, and I'm locking it to the center of the canvas, which will allow me to paint in all four corners simultaneously and symmetrically. I don't really have a strong plan for this design, so I'm just kind of winging it until I find something that looks cool. I end up going with these subtle filigree corners and some indications of feathers coming off of the vertical lines. From there, I can simply lock the transparency again and adjust the values as needed. I want these to be pretty subtle and not compete with the character, so I darken them a fair amount and just add nice little highlights in selective spots. Lastly, I need to create the potion that hangs off her belt. I'm going to start just by describing the shape of the potion itself. So I'm going to create a new layer, use my marquee tool to create the circular base, and then with symmetry mode enabled, paint the neck of the vial. From there, I can free transform it into place, paint out the old pouch behind it, and I then fill the potion with black and set it to linear dodge. This will make all black pixels transparent, and all lighter pixels will brighten values behind them. From there, I can lock the transparency of the potion and simply paint in the light on the glass. Due to the way linear dodge works, I automatically get the effect of transparency that I want, and I just have to paint enough highlights to describe the form of the potion without going overboard. From there, I can create a new layer to paint the liquid inside, and another new layer to paint the details on top, such as the cord wrapping around the neck and some feathers for decoration. At this point, I'm very happy with the changes I've made and how it's looking, so it's time for some final effects and details. I create another linear dodge layer at the very top in my effects stack, and use it to create some glow effect from the circular moon shape behind her. Hopefully this gives you some exciting ideas about how you can use layers in your own work. They're an immensely powerful tool that gives you a lot of control while painting digitally, allowing you to organize complicated files in a meaningful way, and make difficult changes significantly faster and with less headache. As you experiment with layers, they'll become much easier to use, and you'll find a nice rhythm and flow that works really well with your own process. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.